the way I thought of it was, if I have breast cancer, we are going to just take it as it comes and be a team and face this as a team. If I don't have breast cancer, either way, I'm removing my breast, because if I don't have breast cancer, I'm ready. And my husband was like, okay. I was like, I want to do this before I'm done having children. I never, ever, ever, I don't want to go another 6 months and have the feeling that I have right now with me ever, ever, ever again. I just can't live with this anxiety of like feeling like I've known my risk, and now if there's one way to reduce my risk, I want to take that. I need to reduce my risk now. I'm ready. And so I did find out that the tumor was benign. It was a tumor, but it was a benign tumor. I got real lucky. And I felt like when I heard that news, I exhaled, but not really. Like I was like, okay, I have a road still in front of me here, because I know now. This isn't like when somebody else just finds out that they have a benign tumor. This is somebody who there's an 87% chance someday I'm going to have to go and find out that you actually do have breast cancer.
Right. I mean, and the reality is too, it's not only are you aware of the fact that this isn't necessarily the end of the road for this. I haven't won this battle for, the rest of my future. Something else could come up. But also, if you don't mind me saying so, I feel like it's a bunch of emotions, like almost that guilt, like, still kicks in, because I could have avoided this altogether if I just listened to her. And also now you're like, okay, well, I want to move forward with the mastectomy after all. So whether I could get it, have a chance, whatever, it's going to eliminate my chance 100% or just bring it down. I'm going to have to do surgery and recovery and go through, like, it's not just like, phew, there's so many different things going on in your head.
But see, this is the interesting piece. I feel like when breast cancer came into my life when I was 7 years old, it was for a reason, because I realized that I didn't want my daughter living the way that I did. I didn't want her childhood to have that living in the background of her worrying for my health. So that also was something to really help me propel the decision-making process, because I was like, you know what? At that time when I found the lump, she was 15 months old. I'm like, okay, now she's not really going to remember if I do this. Like, you're not going to remember this. She's not going to have this fear anymore. So if I can gift her me and know that she doesn't have to worry for my health, then there's a zillion things that parents have to worry about and children have to worry about today. I don't want my daughter, if I can take away this worry for her, I want to do that. Yeah. And so I knew I was ready. So I immediately did what we all do, and I Googled everything that I needed to do. I'm like, I'm high risk for breast cancer, doesn't have breast cancer. Like, what do I do next? Like, who do I contact? How do I get support? And there are organizations and there are support groups, but that's not really my style. Like, I was like, I don't want to go to a support group. That's not for me. I'm reading the pamphlets and everybody seemed much older. And I just was like, I don't identify with like any of this. And so again, it was that like foreign feeling of navigating this. But lovely Google took me to an organization called Bright Pink. And Bright Pink no longer exists at the capacity that it did before, but it does still now. And it was actually acquired, or parts of it were acquired by Dana-Farber. So it was this full source, like my whole story is so full circle, and we haven't even got to like half of it.
I know.
So it's just like, I know, it's such a...
And you're representing it well, though, with your Bright Pink today.
No, I did not do that on purpose, but
really?
No, I didn't.
Well, it was just meant to be?
It was. I was like trying to find something that I was like, something bright and fun. That was Flirty.
Yes.
So anyways, I realized when I Googled for Bright Pink, I saw that they had this program called a Pink Pal program, and it was a one-to-one mentorship program. And so I called and I spoke to this woman, had an intake form, realized that I wasn't, receiving medical advice and that's important to say today, like I'm not giving anybody medical advice. And this has just been, I am an expert of my own experience, and please, like any opinion of mine or my story, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and you need to talk to your own doctor when it comes to your own experience. But I will say it was something that changed my life, hearing somebody else tell their story to me and have that mentorship for that one-to-one, someone being vulnerable with me, that really put me on the path to have the courage to go a little bit deeper with myself. So I talked to a woman on the phone. I've actually still never met this person face-to-face. Her name's Julia. She lives in Chicago. And at the time, she also had one child. She was, I think she's 2 years older than me. But it was like this role model of somebody who just had her mastectomy and she was thriving. And all I wanted to know was that I could rise with whatever I had going on and still show up and still be Kristina. And I was like, okay, Julia's Julia. Julia's moving on with her life. She doesn't have to think about her mutation every day. That was the only thing that like really lit me up inside to see that like surgically, whether she accepts her body, it doesn't matter. She is now living a life where this isn't the front and center of her brain. And I want to because if you think about it, if you're living in an oncology unit every 6 months and you're going somewhere and you're always having your blood tested or imaging done, you eventually like it catches up.
It's consuming you.
It's a lot of trauma to experience those things and have that anxiety of like, when is the other shoe going to drop, feeling all the time. So she was thriving. She was like getting ready to have another baby. And I was like, wow, that's what I want. I want to just feel like I can move on with my life. I'm ready. And so Julia talked to me about all of the things that I was wanting to, like Google's not going to tell you. Like after you have a mastectomy, is it going to ruin your sex life? What are your boobs going to look like? Are you going to have breasts that are just like totally mutilated? Like I just wanted to know. I actually really wanted to know what she looked like. I was like,
yeah, you're like, can you send me some nudes?
And she totally did. She did. She was so amazing. And now like,
that's awesome.
So if you are going through this and you need me to send nudes or like through Instagram, I'm not serious. If it's somebody who's building a relationship, I do not post. There are many women who are brave and post images of themselves after they've had surgery. I am not that woman, but I have shared my breasts with other women who are going through it because it is something that definitely, so here's the thing. So Julia had a nipple sparing mastectomy, which means that she got to keep her nipples. And I was like, you can do that? And she was like, yeah. So I was like, wow, I think I'm grieving the loss of my nipple because once you lose your nipple, it doesn't even look like a breast, you know? And I'm thinking about like, I'm newly married at that point still. And there's all of this loss. And I was just thinking like, is this going to ruin some parts of my intimate life? Like, am I going to think about this? What about when I'm in the shower? When I look at myself in the shower, am I going to be accepting of myself? And they were like, it was easy to think about how this, you can overcome how it's going to impact yourself, but how's it going to impact me with others?
Yeah, your relationship. You've been with this guy since you were in high school.
Yeah.
If God forbid this puts any sort of wedge between you two emotionally or intimately.
I wasn't worried about Chris, I have to tell you though.
Really?
I was worried more about me. Like,
just your personal relationship with yourself.
To, like, not want to be intimate because I'm so like self-conscious of this.
Well, yes, yeah.
But so anyone who knows me would actually kind of laugh at that because I'm one of the least, I'm just like myself through and through and very authentically me. But all of a sudden now this massive insecurity was brewing of like, this isn't something like I had this victimhood mindset of like, this is happening to me and I don't want this to happen to me. And it was something that I had to really transform and learn how to really accept myself. And it's a process and it's something that you wish you could flip the switch. And when you first have surgery, you want to, like you so badly want to, but you have to experience a lot of firsts afterwards to say like, what's it like when you buy your first bra or you go to a wedding and you're buying a dress or the first time you put on a bathing suit and you're wondering if your scars are popping out or if you are wearing a bikini and can you feel like everyone thinks that your boobs look a little different compared to everybody else's because it doesn't look like a breast augmentation afterwards, even if you have implants. So we'll keep going, but I'll say that it was just a really emotional time. And I was so fortunate that my partner was like, I don't love you for your breasts. I love you for you. And I want to see you around for a really long time. So I'm with you no matter what. And I was so lucky that he was so mature and so embracing and so loving throughout the whole process. And, together we've been tested many times in life. And I think that when you have a true partnership, it means everything. And I know so many young girls that do this and experience this when they're not married, when they're still in a dating game and they have to go about it very differently and talk and introduce themselves to partners and say like, hey, I just want to let you know. And so I feel like, wow, that's a different loophole to go through. But in my experience, my husband was so on board because he just understood what was at stake and became really a really integral part of the mission to just make sure that I'm going to outlive him.
More brownie points for the hubby. He's doing well. He's acing the test. But I want to quickly go back to the nipple sparing because something that you share with me, which again I did not know, was that if you choose to spare the nipple,
you leave behind risk.
Yes. So you have the option of diminishing your risk or lowering your risk.
It's never zero.
But by certain percentages, right?
Yes.
So, well, with just the mastectomy, right? It's never zero. Yes. But if you're going to go through sort of this process, I think it is important to know that, because that is a real thing. Women do want to still feel like, in what way can I maintain a little bit of familiarity with my body and feel like myself? So the nipples might be it for me, but do they understand? Are they having conversations that, hey, you're going through all of this to then keep those nipples, and then you're still not maybe getting the most effective results from this particular surgery that you could, right? That
was definitely a conversation that I had with my breast surgeon. So what happened was I talked to Julia about her nipple sparing, and that's kind of like really when I saw what her breasts looked like with nipples, and said like, wow, obviously it's not the same as a breast augmentation. It doesn't look that way, but her scars were right where the breast naturally folds. And it just all of a sudden became very clear to me, like, okay, this isn't as bad physically the way it looks as what I had in my mind. I had like my aunt's mastectomy in my mind where it was like the X across the breast. And I just had this like, oh God, feeling. And now there are other options. If you have to lose your nipple because of maybe where a tumor is, or you want to lose you feel like you want to forfeit your nipples, you can have nipple reconstruction. You can have your nipples tattooed on and they look really real. But at the time I had one small child and I knew that I wanted to go through this as quick as possible so that her life could be normal. Everybody has a different circumstance. So my circumstance was like, back to my Capricorn, like I have to do this. I have to do this on this timeline. I want to do it during this time of year. I want to do, and like I had the checklist of what my requirements were for myself, what was my best case scenario, and I kind of proceeded that way. Like, okay, where do we go from here? So initially my daughter was 15 months old when I started the process, but then I got a little email and it was like, hey, run for Team Bright Pink, run the Chicago Marathon, and I was like, oh, this is meant for me. I'm not gonna lie. I had like a couple glasses of wine. Call my sister up and I'm like, genius idea. I was like, I'm gonna run my first marathon. I'm totally gonna run a marathon.
No running experience ever.
No, like ran a 5K and thought that like, I ran track in high school, but we're beyond high school now. So I wasn't one of those people that like gets out and runs every day. Didn't really consider myself a runner, know. But I ran 5Ks on occasion for like the beer afterwards and like the fun environment. And I all of a sudden felt really called to this. And I said, if I can run a marathon, I can confidently walk into an operating room. And so my sister was like, oh shit, I got to pour wine now. And I was like, why? She's like, because you're not doing it alone. I'm going to run with you. And so she started out on this journey with me. We and a bunch of friends also signed up for Team Bright Pink. We raised a ton of money. We ran the Chicago Marathon. And a few months later, I turned 30. And 4 days after my 30th birthday, I confidently walked in to have my mastectomy. And what I will say is that process for me gave me so much freedom. It was like the first time in my life I felt like, oh my God, I don't have to carry the weight of that number 87 anymore and don't have an 87% risk. So when I made that decision about keeping my nipples, it was more or less for psychological reasons. And I had this conversation with you have a breast surgeon and a plastic surgeon. And the process is the breast surgeon goes in, removes all of the breast tissue, the plastic surgeon's there, and he or she high fives the breast surgeon saying like, great job, and everything looks good. And the plastic surgeon takes over if you choose to have reconstruction. Some people choose to go flat. And I'm supportive of and the reason why you would is because you don't want to have a foreign object or go through reconstruction and just end it that day. Many women choose that option. And so I wanted reconstruction. My plastic surgeon did an incredible job. And it was initially difficult to have my breast surgeon leave my nipples behind. I had to really butter her up. And I was like, okay, listen, I really want to have a bilateral, means both sides double, mastectomy. And I'd really like it to be nipple sparing. And she just was like, I don't recommend that. I was like, well, why? She said, because the more tissue I leave behind, the higher it is for your risk. And I was like, okay. Imagine I'm your best friend or your sister, and I'm asking you and telling you that every day when I get in the shower, this decision will be much easier for me to confidently do if I have nipples. And I really want to see if you're the one to help me keep my nipples. Is that something you still feel like you should remove your nipples? And she paused and she looked at me and she said, if my sister or best friend said, I want to keep my nipples for those reasons, I would try to find a way. And I looked at her and I was like, all right, well, you're the woman for the job then. And so it's important to say, like, you do need to advocate for yourself because surgeons have their agendas too. They're wonderful people, but they also have pressure from their higher ups and their bosses. Yeah. And, you know, they're maybe having a quota or a reputation that they want to have. And I did leave behind risk, but it was a 2% risk. And I was like, I've been living with 87%. If my risk for breast cancer is still under 5%, still under what the average woman has to worry about, I'll take that risk because it just will help me on a day-to-day much better. Now, someone else might not feel that way, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. You have to do what's best for you and what your circumstances are like. If you're facing this, and just know everybody's, their reasoning behind everything is very, very different. So I had my surgery. Surgery went really well. Mm-hmm. Reconstruction means that you have like a time period I had expanders put in. They went behind my pectoral muscles. And so every week or 2 weeks, I would go in for a fill, which meant that saline was injected into my expanders and my chest wall cavity was expanded. And it essentially just like felt like elephants coming in on my chest. But it was really funny because for the first time, I mean, I told you I was part of the itty bitty titty committee. And for the first time in my life, I'm looking down and like, you just watch your boobs inflate. Like my chest was getting bigger and bigger, like watching someone literally inject it in. And my plastic surgeon was belly laughing in bright red because I all of a sudden burst out. I was like, where was this in middle school? And he was like, oh my God, nobody's ever said that before. And I'm like, I know most people are crying during this process, but I was like, yeah,
you're like, this is cool.
Yeah. And that's not to like take away because it's a brutal experience. It's not an easy experience. But for me, kind of laughing through it and just making sure that I still felt connected back to myself along the way was so important. And not everybody feels that way. Like some people need to cry. Some people need to go in and like feel every single thing that they're going through. But for me, I knew that this was going to give me freedom. And so I kept taking that on. It's like, this is my chance to be free. So I'm going to feel free and enjoy this.